and welcome or welcome back. I'm Lori Carbonneau, Executive Director of the McLean Project for the Arts, and this is day 10 of our MPA Artfest Meet the Artist series. It's a real silver lining of MPA Artfest 2020, the chance to get to know each of our artists in their own home studio environment. Tonight we thank Cheryl Edwards. She's a painter, a printmaker, a contemporary artist, a member of our board MPA Education Committee, and an integral part of our MPA Outreach program. Cheryl, thank you so much for this evening. And we know that you, as well as our audience, are going to enjoy time with Aaron Bowles and Katie Keister. It's a treat for you to be a part of MPA Artfest 2020. We encourage you to go check out our MPAartfest.org website if you've not been there yet. I will tell you, you might be one of the few because the traffic on it has been resounding. We're excited about the success and are particularly thrilled that the marriage of that website plus this virtual environment are giving us a chance to get to know our MPA Artfest artists in a way we never have before. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, Aaron. How are you?
I'm great, Cheryl. Good to meet you.
I would like to welcome everybody to our artist interviews. It is the 18th year of the McLean Project for the Arts Artfest. And as this year we're virtual, but no less creative. And we're bringing some wonderful artists to you. Today we have Aaron Bowles. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, I've had a long career as an artist. I attended East Carolina University and Virginia Commonwealth University, where I majored in communication arts. I then later attended George Mason and majored in painting and drawing in a postgraduate situation. I have had a long career as an advertising creative director and graphic designer. So those are really my skill sets as a digital artist. Back in about the early 90s, I saw the advent of the web and went on to be much more digitally heavy in my work. And in fact, I designed the first MPA website.
Oh my goodness. So your practice today, tell us a little bit more of your current practice is digital, and can you just expound upon that a little bit more as it relates to the works that you are exhibiting in the art festival this year?
My current practice is all about paint. I love the physicality of paint, the plasticity, to use a wonderful antique word. But I use Photoshop as a sketch tool. I'm really kind of a magpie when it comes to getting images. I'll get images from anywhere. I take a bunch myself. I grab them from Flickr. I'm an absolute thief when it comes to images. And then I always alter them or manipulate them in some way in Photoshop, especially changing up the colors.
So tell me something, Aaron. Do you have any particular subjects that you are very interested in or concepts that serve as the ideas for your particular paintings?
I have always been interested in landscape, and in fact, the very first drawings that I made were images of my suburban neighborhood and a view of the houses. And actually it was in black and white and gray because I was afraid of color. And I didn't really start using color until another year later. This was at about the age of 12. And then so on, I began to become very, very interested in Impressionist landscape and American realism, and painted that way for many years. And I still do paint in what I'll call post-impressionism. So I have a real affinity for the landscape. However, in college, I took figure drawing in one way or another in every single semester I was there. And so I really love drawing the figure, and I've done a recent series called the Desire Collection. And that's men and women together, and it mixes in elements of mythology and relationships and dreams.
That's interesting.
I'm sorry.
That's interesting. Can you tell me, is there a particular palette that you work with in your painting?
Can you see that?
Yes.
The palette I work with is very, very colorful, and it changes all the time. I make my own color mixes and put them in the tube. Color is dangerous and fascinating and very, very difficult. But without color, I wouldn't like to be painting. I attempted to paint in some very neutrals, you know, it's kind of au courant now. And I attempted to use siennas and burnt umber and so forth, and I just couldn't do it. I did that for about 20 minutes and then I threw it away. So I'm very much a chromatic guy.
So tell us, Aaron, about the work that people will see when they look at your work in this art festival.
This particular group of work is going to be called the Fragile Earth series. I've started a group that is something that's very important to me, is this issue of global warming and climate change and our relationship as a people with the earth. We are wasteful and just really quite terrible to the earth. And so I feel very strongly about this. And so this is a series of images of which started as one called The Fragile Sea, and then it morphed into a series called The Deep Woods. And I'm now doing a view of creeks. So those are the three subject matters. And for each painting sold in this series, I make a donation to an environmental charity, like the Union of Concerned Scientists.
And what are the dimensions of the work that you're selling at the Art Fest?
The largest work is 48 by 60. The smallest is 5 by 7, so it's a broad range. Many will be 12 by 12 or 24 by 24.
That is really interesting. I like the titles, I like the concept, and I like your examination of the environment. I think it's very apropos based upon what we're currently experiencing, you know, at the peak of it. People have been aware, but for you to use that in your work so that folks can visually see it is something else. It
really came out of a frustration of not being able to do anything. And I just was at a point where I'm a landscape guy. I was asking myself, what do I care about? You know, if there was a cause that I wanted to support, what would it be? And it was definitely the environment. And so if you look,
okay, that's
I don't know whether you can see these striations or not, but
I could see the light over the water. I believe that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. So this work is a combination, and I call it modernist, where I'm taking realistic subject matter and integrating these striated lines and using this sort of knife work, very, very textured, very heavily textured. In fact, this one is probably the most technical one. Yes, the palette knife, yes. And a brayer. I use a roller, an ink roller.
Use the brayer. That's interesting.
Yeah. Here's the brayer right here.
Okay.
And that's this texture right here.
Okay.
And then this, I don't know whether you can see, but this is a window washer squeegee. And I've cut these dentral shapes in it. And so that's that.
So you spend very little time with the paintbrush, it seems.
Actually, I spent quite a bit of time with the paintbrush as well. Because I am also an impressionist or a post-impressionist, I use the paintbrush a fair amount. This is some paintbrush. But yeah, in this series, it varies. I am very agnostic about mark making. I'll just do whatever works.
Okay, and our last couple of minutes that we have left, is there anything else you want to say about your work or say to the audience?
Well, I think it might be interesting to know for them how the Photoshop stuff looks.
Your process.
I don't know if
Great.
you can see that. This is from one called The Deep Woods, and I've taken a standard photograph and then whacked it out, I call it. Here's another example where I'm finding these angles. I don't know if you can see that angle.
I can see
call
it.
those lines. I call those lines of force. They come from Cézanne, as a matter of fact, Cézanne's theories of composition. So here's how the color tests went. The process of making these, I do a ton of color tests.
Okay,
So,
okay. That's interesting.
and then here's another one. And I do them on these little 8x10 things. And here's another one with a different kind of palette, a lighter, more orangey tinted palette instead of darker. So that's how it works, is it goes from Photoshop to the color text.
I find your colors to be rich
Yes.
and thoughtful, and I find the incorporation of the attention to texture to add it and make it very puts you between realism and dream state, and how you handle the light. I really like it.
Thank
I
you
want
so
to
much.
thank you. You can tell us one couple of statements, and I just want to thank you for being with us.
I absolutely love MPA. It's a great organization. I've known a lot of people there over the years, and I really look forward to this year's festival, and I hope you all have a wonderful time.
Thank you. I'm introducing you and presenting Katie Keisler. How are you doing today, Katie?
Just great, thanks.
Katie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became an artist?
I probably became an artist reluctantly, but it just seemed like I loved fibers. I grew up in a family that did quilting and knitting, and I always had fibers around me, and it just sort of came out. And then when you start creating things, you start creating big piles of things.
Okay.
And then you have to get rid of them. So you give them away, and then eventually my daughter said, well, Mom, why don't we make this official or legal or whatever? So that's when I became more serious about my art. So.
And how long have you been making art, Katie? It sounds like you've been doing it all
my life, right? But I've been focusing on felting, which is what I'm currently doing, for about 20 years.
Okay, so can you explain to us a little bit more extensively about your practice? And I know felting is not easy. Can you talk to us about what concerns you in your work?
Actually, felting is very easy. Right. Actually, felting is very easy. Once you know the principle of taking wool and putting it together, and so for instance, you have probably felted a sweater in the dryer. When you take a sweater and you put it in the dryer and it becomes smaller and denser, you have felted. So it's actually very easy to do, whether you want to do it or not. But the process I use mostly is to take the fibers, the wool fibers, and embed them in silk fabric.
Oh, that sounds.
And when you've embedded them, you can then felt them down, so that they come down, and you get this wonderful texture on the silk, because the silk gets pulled along, and so you get these wonderful textures, as well as then you can play with the colors and shapes and things like that. So it's actually a very easy medium to work with once you understand it.
Can you explain to us what are some of the artworks that we are going to see when we look at you and your work in this festival?
Well, mostly what I have done is scarves. I sort of started with scarves, so they're silk and wool scarves that are multicolored and textured.
Is it possible for you to show one to us?
I can. I don't know how to.
Yeah, that's it. It's good. That's good enough. That's how long are they, or what are the dimensions?
This is 32 inches long, 72. They're usually about 5 or 6 feet long and vary between 10 and 15. So you can sort of wear them both as a shawl or as a scarf.
And they're very warm, very warm.
They are, because silk, even though it's very thin, it's very warm.
Will you please hold that up again so we can look at the colors that you have in there?
Okay. How's that? Does that help?
Yes, that's lovely. I see green and indigo. I see purple.
So these are squares of something I make called a pre-felt. So I make a pre-felt with the wool, and then I embed it in the silk, and so you can't see it on the other side. It's just on top of the silk. But
that's gorgeous.
I patchwork it.
Will you have other items in the festival that you've created?
Yes. So I have scarves. I have purses. So I do. This is a felted purse with silk in underneath. You can do this wonderful surface design. So there's this one. This one I actually embedded the colored felt and then embroidered on top of it. So it's you can do a lot. You can do a lot with felt. So I have purses, bags, scarves. One of the things I really have enjoyed lately is taking wool as a fleece. So when it comes off the sheep, it's called a fleece. And you can, so here's just a little piece of a fleece. So this is like what was on the sheep. This is a particular breed of sheep called a Wensleydale. There's also a breed of sheep called a Masham. And they have this wonderful long curly fleeces, and I put them together into almost like a boa. So and then I dye them. So they're just these wonderful furry, I call them furry fleeces, because they're natural, but you can wear them. So that's my most fun thing I've done lately is play with just the fleece as it comes off and I embed it in the silk up at the top.
Yeah, it looks like llama hair to me. Llama hair. It's interesting. The length of it.
It's I don't have any, but some of it can be 12 inches long. And if you look up Masham sheep, they look like these hairy, it's like you wouldn't want to have to comb it. It's just these corkscrew locks, but they're
gorgeous though.
are, and they have a beautiful sheen to them. So it's really fun to work with something that's very natural. I do my own dyeing, but I also like to keep things in the natural color of the fleece. So those are the things.
I really love your palette. Can you explain to us what is your most often used palette? What colors do you often use?
It's kind of depending on my mood, but my daughter is always pushing me into oranges and teals, and I find I can't work with a color I don't like. And so I speak towards the jewel tones. So you'll notice the scarf I held up earlier is mostly purples and fuchsia with some olive in it. So I use, complementary colors. I love working with teal, lime greens. One year I just did the colors of sky, as in the Isle of Skye. My daughter and I had visited the island, and just looking at the landscape there, it's these rich earth tones, but olives and blues and fuchsias and yellows, and just trying to work with those colors that we see in nature. That's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I see the color wheel behind you. Can you tell me what's behind you? Tell us about everything that we're looking at.
I use the color wheel a fair amount, but I can show you that this is the color wheel that I made with wool. So these I started with red wool, yellow wool, and blue wool, and then just blended it in my fingers. So I put a little bit of yellow and red and basically made the color wheel with just those three colors of wool.
So you see three colors.
Yeah, so when I'm working on something in this color palette, I'll take the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel.
Right.
And that will be the predominant, and then I'll pop across the color wheel just for a little interest. It makes, if you have these colors, it makes it pop, and it really gives depth to your work. One of the things I love to do is layering. So I will layer wool, and then I'll put some silk fibers, and then I'll add on some purple locks from sheep, just to build up the layers and just make it more interesting.
So how many layers would your average pieces consist of?
Well, if I go back to this scarf that I held up for you, it probably has silk on the bottom and then wool, and then I use 2 or 3 layers. And sometimes I will take, I'm trying to find something on here. I'll take I hand print my own silk patterns on the silk. So I might take a square of a certain pattern silk fabric and then just put a pop of wool on top of that. So you've got the silk that's patterned and then maybe a dot of wool. So you're building up interest.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what are those white works that I'm looking at behind you?
These are 3-dimensional tiles. So this just shows you some of the things that you can do with wool. It's all felted together, but there are layers. So when I felted it, it was had resists, and I felted it all together. But then you get these wonderful textures and 3-dimensional structures. So it's almost like sculpture.
Right. It is sculpture. It's like soft sculpture.
Yeah. So I just play with these, and then I discovered, because I always thought I loved working with color, because color is just everything. And so when I started doing these, and it's just white. I surprised myself at how much I enjoyed just white and playing with the shapes. So this is one, there are just a lot of structural things you can do
Okay.
to make one color, but three-dimensional. So these are tiles. I don't know if I'll have any of these in the show. I had them a couple years ago.
Okay. But you will have scarves, and you will have purses, and you will have the boas.
I'll have the furry boas. Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say to us before we go?
Well, I really appreciate how hard you all are working to keep the artists, to support the arts and the artists during this time when it's pretty hard to have face-to-face interactions. I mean, I love the sale because I love talking to people about what I do.
Right.
And because it's very interactive, and usually I have the materials I work with, which are silk and wool, and the kids come up and play with it. And you can, teaching is really a passion of mine. So I love being able to, but I can't do that this year. And I've missed that, but I appreciate what you're trying to do to keep us going and to keep us before the public and keep something going till next year when life is less complicated.
Well, Katie, I want to thank you for sharing yourself, because when you share your art, you share yourself.
Yes.
You so generously shared your process and your thoughts of how you create and welcome us into your space, which is, you know, although we don't have the festival, that is a very special, unique thing that most collectors don't see and don't get an opportunity to experience. And so I just want to thank you for participating, and I love your work. And we want to thank everybody. We want you to make sure you look at Katie's work and that you take something home with you. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.